Let me tell you something about your dad. He was hard. He grew up hard. He didn't have an education, and he was embarrassed by that, and he never would talk about that, but he was the smartest individual I've ever known, smartest businessman I've ever known. He and Hank Jones pioneered the souvenir business that NASCAR has today. They built the foundation. Earnhardt was a brilliant, your dad was a brilliant man, smartest man I've ever known. It's crazy. He was very private, very, very private. It was a rare occasion that he would open up and you really see who he is. He got the Intimidator because he was an introvert. He was never comfortable carrying on a conversation for a long period of time. And so he got some bad raps about being short with his temper and his demeanor, but it was undeserving. People didn't know him. He opened up to me at my farm one day. Just he and I, we'd been hunting all day long, and I'd talked to Hank Jr. on the phone. That's back in the hardline days. We had no cell phone, and I talked to Hank Jr. on the phone. And when I got off the phone, your dad looked at me and he said, "I don't know how to love my kid like you love your kid." And I said, "Well, we're different, Dale. We're different. You love him just as much as I love Hank Jr. You just don't know how to express it." And he said, "Well, I'm in broken marriages and I'm not married to the mom, and it's hard." I said, "You just have to let go. You are who you are, and I know how much you love your kids. You just have a hard time expressing it." And he never was able to express to you how much he loved you. He never was able. And you always felt like he loved you when you won and he didn't when you didn't win.
Right.
And I could tell that. And I've always wanted somehow to get you and just grab hold of your shoulders and tell you how hurt he was that he did not know how to express his love to you. And he teared up. And for Big E, the Intimidator, just he and I sitting in the living room, to share that with me showed me how tight we were at heart as friends.
Yeah.
But it also showed me a side of him that was sad, because he really wanted to have the same relationship. That I'm outgoing, I'm free to talk, and I'm not intimidated to say I love you. All that didn't fit his demeanor, but it was in his heart. And he expressed to me that day, he said, "I don't know how to love my kids like you love your kids." I said, "Oh, you love them just as much. You just don't know how to express it."
Dang.
And that was heartfelt.
I'd have loved to have heard that story a long time ago.
He loved you. Let me tell you, we were in a tent in New Mexico, in Silver City, New Mexico. And we talking racing, talking about Hank Jr.'s opportunities. You were running the Bud car. And he looked at me and he said, "That's the dumbest thing I ever did in my life, is getting that boy that Bud sponsor." He said, "I should have went with Burger King." He said, "That has not been good for him."
Oh, man.
That's not been good for him. I said, "Well, it looks to me like he's doing pretty good." He said, "That ain't what I'm talking about." That ain't what I'm talking about. He said, "I don't have him in the environment I'd like to have him in."
Dang.
That was your dad.
Yeah.
And he had a heart, and
Yeah.
he loved his kids. He just didn't know how to express it.
Wow. I've watched a couple of your videos, something you did, I guess, in the last couple of years, where you genuinely have thought about Dad. And I knew y'all were close. I knew y'all were so similar, even just your looks when you stood next to each other. It was interesting how comparable y'all were. Your sons, born 2 days apart, and both juniors, and I felt a real instant connection to Hank Jr. that we would just be buddies no matter what, right? But I saw this video a couple years ago, or I saw it just recently, but I think you made it in the last 2 years, where you got really, you're standing at this tree stand. That was Dad's favorite stand, and you're talking about how that the that you had no one ever had hunted that since, right? And that Stan's been there. And there was I knew y'all were close. I knew y'all were I knew y'all had conversations. I knew that you knew Dad and had moments with him that not many people would be able to experience. He would open up to you and literally count on one hand the other people he would ever have those type of conversations with. And so it's really fun to hear some of those conversations. I'd ask you, there's a million things I'd ask him if I could. But this is as good as it gets for me these days, is to hear from people like you. But listening to you talk about that tree stand and how much you love Dad and how important he was to you, even all these years later, you still remember the value in that relationship y'all had. It's as valuable to you today as it was when he was here. We tend to forget.
When you get older, you realize how important people are in your life, and all the trophies they tarnish, the money's gone, and what you have is way more valuable than the trophies or the money, is the memories of the people that you encountered. And your dad impacted my life in such a big way. He was bigger than life as a personality, but as a real person that a lot of people never knew. I knew a lot about him that a lot of people never, ever knew. And he was a cool guy. He was a cool guy.
Yeah.
And he was different than what people perceive him to be, because his reputation was so powerful and so big that you tend to overlook who the guy was that was in that uniform.
Yeah.
And he was a different guy than what a lot of people. And to me, the most important thing in life is Jesus Christ. That is by far the most important thing. Your dad was an intimidator in a lot of ways. And I've talked to him and shared my testimony and my relationship with Jesus. But I never really buttonholed him. I'd ask him from time to time. And the last trip we made together, Donnie Reeves was with us, and his diabetes, he's a diabetic, his medicine was on the wing of your dad's airplane, and his Bible. And so I was getting in the plane. He said, "Watch out, don't kick that. That's precious." I said, "What's precious, the Bible or the medicine?" And he looked at me and he said, "Both." And I got on the airplane. And so Dennis Fisher, who he brought over from California, built our engines. And I'm not long after your dad died, I'm sitting in a chair at dinner, Dennis Fisher, and he said, "Boy, we miss our buddy, don't we?" I said, "Dennis, I can't tell you how much I miss him. I cannot tell you. I had no idea the emotions that down inside of me on how much I love Dale Earnhardt." And I said, I miss him. I said, "But I don't know about Dale. I never buttonholed him. I never had him, Dale, tell me when you got saved. Tell me if you're saved." I never did that. And Dennis Fisher said, "Well, I want to put your mind at ease." He said, "He was sitting in the chair you're sitting in. I'm sitting right here where I'm sitting." And I said, "Dale, what's going to happen to you if they scrape you up off the wall? Where are you going to spend eternity?" And he said, "Dennis, I'm going to heaven." And he said, "Dale, why in the world would you go to heaven?" And he said, "Because I asked Jesus Christ to be my Savior." And I believe that's true. And I believe Dale Earnhardt's in heaven. And I believe I'm going to sit around with him around the big campfire, and we're going to have stories for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I believe that too. I've never I never really obviously didn't have these kind of conversations with Dad that you did or that Dennis did. But I always felt like Dad had, that was important to Dad, his relationship with the Lord and our dedication to that. I mean, those things, he incorporated that into his kids' lives. That was important for him, that they understood that relationship. And but I feel pretty good about that myself, that I'll see him again. people deal with loss differently. People deal with that however they got to deal with it. I really don't give people advice on that, but you pick what you want to pick, right? What you want to believe. But I think, that I'll see him. I spent a little bit of time missing him. Certainly there are days when, even yesterday, we were sitting here talking about something, and I was like, man, I'd love to ask him about this. But I just know that I don't have this feeling in the back of my heart that I don't have this sort of constant missing. Man, I miss him. Because I know I'll see him. I just know it. I know that I'll see him. I know he knows where I'm at. I know he knows what I'm doing. I know he knows we're sitting right here doing this. And I'll see him again, And I hope that I remember all the things that I need to ask him.
You will. It'll be good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you won't ask if you'll listen.
I'll be listening. He'll be there.
You're saying he'll be in charge?
He's going to be in charge. There's no doubt.